In today's video, we're going to be taking a look here at the upcoming pattern, and we've been talking about this for a few days now, but it is expected to be relatively cold compared to normal at times. It is going to be warmer than normal at times, and I think the biggest difference in this upcoming pattern is actually going to be kind of when we compare it to what things have been like in early March, because it's going to be significantly colder than that, as we've been in a above normal pattern here for a couple of weeks overall now. So it is going to be a big time switch up. Definitely interesting to see, and I'm pretty confident that we are going to see a warm up come back at some point during late March into early April, if not into mid-April. I don't think this cold is gonna last, over 3 or 4 weeks, just like what we saw in the winter. The cooldowns lasted about 2 to 3 weeks at a time. I think that's the maximum of what we're looking at here. But then again, I did predict that we would see a warm pattern straight through March and into early April, and that's been wrong. So take it with a grain of salt, of course. This pattern has been quite tricky. Now, as we take a look at the 6 to 10 day temperature period here, we can see that this is for March 25th through 29th. We do see above normal temperatures here throughout the west, and we call this a positive PNA, and in turn this basically causes the cold to move straight into the east. Again, talking about last winter, this is what we saw a lot of last winter, so this could be similar to that, obviously in a much less intense form. As we take a look at the 6 to 10 day precipitation outlook, we can see a little bit drier here throughout the four corner states and throughout the southeast. This has also been kind of just jumping around every single day, and the models definitely agree with this at this point. Just definitely interesting. This 25th through 29th time frame might be in between storms for the southeast area, because there hasn't been a huge lack of activity or anything out there. We can see that a lot of our storm systems are going to move onshore to the northwest, kind of continue into the Great Lakes and move north of most of the United States. And we will have quite a bit of storminess here for Texas in particular, and then southern Florida as well. But an overall quieter look here, as you can see. As we just move into that 8 to 14 day temperature outlook here for the 27th now through April 2nd, we can see above normal temperature still for a lot of the west, but also including now the south central states and even into the southeast. So we see a lot of these areas. This warmth is kind of pushing eastward, is what you can imagine. And I think that this might be near the end of the cooldown in the east. This is our first opportunity for that, at least. Colder temperatures up here in the upper Midwest, Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic, Northeast. But this is much more suppressed to the north than it was on previous frames. But we're still getting a little bit of that positive PNA effect here. Now, as we take a look here at the precipitation pattern during this time frame, we can see activity actually increases for a lot of the west, north central, and then definitely there in the Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic, Northeast states, we're seeing a huge increase. A little drier still over the southern four corner states, but nothing crazy. This is a much more active looking pattern than what we saw previously for that 6 to 10 day period. As we take a look at the past 20 days, which will be the final day of February, and then everything we've seen in March so far. And March 1st actually marks meteorological spring, so you can kind of look at this as your meteorological spring so far as well. But we have been in the very opposite pattern from what we're expecting here upcoming, where we had a negative PNA along the west here, overall cooler temperatures. And instead of that forcing the cold air into the east, it's actually over these areas. It actually forces the warm to move around that area into the central and eastern areas. So we've seen the very opposite of that so far. So again, big difference from this, where we're multiple degrees above average for most areas, and we're moving into a few degrees below normal for most of these areas. So that is in most areas going to be a 5 to 10 degree swing on most days. Definitely going to be a pretty big switch up. Now, as we take a look at the model guidance here, I want to take us towards this evening. We are having pretty bad severe storms in the Midwest, into the Ohio Valley, in particular Illinois and Indiana. Been seeing some tornado warnings flying up, severe thunderstorm warnings to the north of there, because our low is over kind of like northern Illinois. We have seen snowfall throughout Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and into the upper peninsula of Michigan. Again, that thunderstorm corridor is mostly going to be in these pockets here. where we do actually have an enhanced risk of severe weather today, which is a 3 out of 5 risk of severe weather, which is pretty elevated. We'll look at the Storm Prediction Center at the end of this video, of course. I want to keep going, though. I want to take us towards tomorrow afternoon, and what we see is a lot of this thunderstorm activity will be more spread throughout the Mid-Atlantic and Southeast. This risk is very marginal for severe weather, if at all, because we don't have a severe outlook at all right now. We mostly just have a general thunderstorm risk in there. So general thunderstorms expected, but anything is possible. So still heed every watch, warning, and advisories, as we tend to sometimes still see some severe weather in these. It's just not expected for the most part. But thunderstorm activity could be going on throughout these areas as we're about to cool down. Tomorrow is going to be quite warm along the eastern seaboard. Until that cold front rolls through, that is going to change everything. The Northwest also seeing their fair share of storminess moving in, snowfall and rainfall respectively for some of these areas moving in. Definitely very, very interesting, but a lot of what we've been seeing. For the day on Friday, tomorrow, or not tomorrow, a few days from now, we can see a straight jet stream moving into the Pacific Northwest, and it does begin to trough a little bit here in the east. Nothing crazy, but a little cooler in the east after that cold front has moved through. That low is now offshore of Maine. We are seeing some snowfall there in Maine. I want to backtrack a little bit because we do see a bit of snowfall for upstate New York into Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Maine there. Not a huge concern, but might pick up an inch or two in some spots. The Northwest, that kind of snowfall rages on into Saturday. And really it spreads a lot into the northern Rockies, much more. So we're seeing this whole area seeing a threat of storminess for the most part. Still, the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast seeing some showers, both in the form of rainfall and snowfall, depending on your elevation and specific location, but still rather dramatic with the storminess up there. As we take a look at Sunday on March 23rd, we see a stronger low for the upper Midwest. It does have some snowfall going on around it, especially the further north you are. But I think this is mostly going to be a thunderstorm concern, in my opinion, for these areas. We see heavier precipitation in here, which might mean more showers than thunderstorms overall. We do have a risk of severe weather on this day, particularly Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Mississippi, Tennessee, and Louisiana kind of being pinpointed. So I think more of the isolated and scattered about stuff underneath might be the bigger concern here overall. We can see that as we move towards Monday, this all kind of begins to move eastward, where once again, similarly to a lot of our storms that have moved through, I think we're going to see a thunderstorm threat for parts of the deep south, southeast, and up into the mid-Atlantic here as well. And really, the jet stream is taking form into what we saw from the National Weather Service now. We're seeing this positive PNA creating a ridge over the west, and cooler temperatures really, really diving in behind this cold front underneath this storm. So we have a 990 there over the Great Lakes. This is causing some Great Lakes and Canadian snowfall, even snowfall up there in Vermont and New Hampshire, as well as Maine. But that is front-end snowfall, and we might see rainfall associated with it as well. So we see after that storm moves through, we'll see Tuesday afternoon, where we're still in this very warm in the west, cool in the east pattern overall, but much quieter as far as precipitation. I want to keep going here as we reach towards Wednesday here on the 26th. We do see a storm system moving around this jet stream and around this trough more in particular. This will pose a what I would call slight risk of a snowstorm for some of these areas. If it's a little bit more embedded in the cold air, we could see something come out of this. But again, we're looking at late March. I mentioned this yesterday. I want everybody to take this threat with a grain of salt. It is something that we're going to monitor, and the threat is real. The threat is there. But it's going to be harder than if it was January or February for this to come to fruition and really pan out. So we will track it, but the odds of something causing this to not be a major snowstorm is relatively high for something to interfere with that. So time will tell, of course. As we move overnight, we get a little bit of snowfall there in Maine from it, but that's about it. For Thursday, the 27th afternoon, we have an interesting frame here where we get a rather large ridge in the west, but it's not over the west coast. We see this positive PNA is causing more warmth along the Rockies and plains here by this point than anything. We are seeing a little bit of storminess and colder air intruding there on the northwest, and then we still have a trough here in the east, but I suspect that a lot of this warmth could be heading eastward after this point if this cold in the west presumes or resumes. that's really going to aid things in kind of turning around. And by Friday, we're kind of taking another step in that direction. Again, more cold, more snow for the Northwest here. And this ridge is now centered over the center of the nation. And we still have some cold over the Northeast with some snowfall, but it seems like the warmth is moving eastward pretty clearly here. Saturday on the 29th, that kind of all comes true, where we see a ridge now over especially the center states there, central states, and we see quite a bit of it moving eastward as well. And then we have a major trough in the west with storminess and snowfall in there. This is definitely a pattern reset, at least on this model, but it is happening at days 10. We could see this get pushed back or pushed forward or changed altogether. So it's another thing that we're just going to have to monitor, as there could be changes, but fingers crossed that this could bring us back into a much more spring-like pattern, and really reset everything. As we move towards Sunday on the 30th, not much changes, although there is many concerns here. 990 millibar over, I would say, the areas between Kansas and Colorado is a huge concern here, because this is very similar to our severe weather outbreak so far this year. A storm right in this area. Clear warm front look to me here happening to the east, in a very clear cold front obviously developing there. And this would bring a concerning severe weather look for a lot of these areas, especially Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, maybe up into Nebraska. This would all move eastward into Iowa, Missouri, Arkansas, and Louisiana as well over time. But Sunday the 30th, this is a very concerning look. You'd be watching along this cold front for potential supercells or embedded supercells, or maybe just a very, very bad looking straight line wind event or linear storm mode. We'll be watching for all of these things. This low also brings with it a major threat for snowfall across the Rockies and northern plains. So more of that on the way, perhaps. By the time we reach Monday on the 31st, we see that a lot of this potential severe weather is still around for Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, and maybe even up into Michigan here. It's interesting. Your warm front is very traditional. We have the low here with the warm front kind of bowing out ahead of things, but the cold front looks to be way ahead of that low, which does happen. A little unorganized there. It's pretty clear that we have a significant trough going on in the west and still a massive ridge. So this could be 3 or 4 days in a row of 60s and 70s for a lot of these areas here, if we get into a pattern like this. And obviously this would be a pretty massive reset. By Tuesday, that cold front is still moving through, still kind of hanging out in the same areas, the southern plains and deep south, up into parts of the Midwest and Ohio Valley. Really just a nasty looking storm. It starts with eastward progression into the deep south, areas across the Tennessee and Ohio valleys there as well. This definitely would present itself as a severe weather risk for these areas once again. And then probably for the day on Thursday, the 3rd of April, we'd have another kind of mid-Atlantic and southeast, maybe even up into the northeast severe weather threat like we had just a few days ago. So definitely still very active, very concerning. And on this model run overall, we get a more wintry look for a while there, but we do return to the spring-like pattern, and it does bring with it a return to the above average severe weather activity, especially considering the time of year. Looking at the GFS model, we get our first storm. We get the second one here as well. We get the cold times, and we do return kind of to a warmer pattern here. We get a low developing in the same area here a little bit later, but it's nowhere near as strong. And we do see thunderstorms and potential severe weather out ahead of it, but we don't get that major system at all that we saw in the European model. But we do return into a much more spring-like pattern here. Looking at the total precipitation, we do see an above average amount across a lot of the Northwest. And now for more of the interior areas like the South Central states, the Deep South, the Midwest, the Great Lakes here, that's going to be your areas to watch, and certainly much drier than normal across the Southeast here, similarly to what we saw some of from the National Weather Service. So looking at this, again, above average for a lot of the Northwest, also above normal for the Northern Plains, Great Lakes, Upper Midwest, and down through the South Central states and Deep South as well. But it's this Mid-Atlantic and Southeast area where we have a big dry slot, and same thing with the Southwest. Total snowfall in the European model, a little bit more underwhelming than what we saw yesterday. We see that the mountainous west does great unless you're in the Sierra Nevada, where we're seeing a little bit of a lackluster amount of snow. We do see some of this kind of spread into the northern plains, upper Midwest, and Great Lakes there. And we do see some snowfall for New England, especially in the classic areas that won't be surprising, like the Adirondack Mountains, the Green Mountains, the White Mountains, and then Maine. A little bit spreading into some more surprising areas. It's mostly the GFS model where we're going to see the surprising snowfall. Basically none for the Sierra Nevada mountains, and actually just a reduced amount, I would say, over the mountainous west in general. A big time increase over the northern plains, upper Midwest, and Great Lakes, and then even some for the mid-Atlantic up into the northeast. So a big time increase for these areas on the GFS model versus the European model, but actually a decrease for the mountainous west overall. Definitely there's huge differences between these two, as you can tell. Take this one with a grain of salt. Again, it is harder to get snowfall this time of year, especially in the mid-Atlantic, but also I would say the Ohio Valley and Northeast, depending on where you're at. Definitely reason to be a little bit skeptical. The European model is probably the more realistic one, but every once in a while, the GFS model will nail something like this. We'll have to see. Looking at the Storm Prediction Center outlooks, again, we do have an enhanced risk today, but we'll break it down level by level. We have the general thunderstorm risk areas in the lighter greens where we expect general thunderstorms, but anything is possible, so heed every watch, warning, and advisory. We have the darker green area across the Midwest, Ohio Valley, Great Lakes, and into the Deep South, where we have a level 1 marginal risk, where we expect some isolated severe weather to be possible. The yellow area across the Midwest and Ohio Valley there is your level 2 slight risk, where we expect some scattered about severe weather. And then the orange area there between Illinois and Indiana is that level 3 enhanced risk, where we expect a little bit more widespread severe weather to be possible. Looking towards tomorrow on Thursday, the 20th, into the morning of Friday, the 21st, we have 2 general thunderstorm risk areas, one up here near the northern Rockies, and one here for parts of the mid-Atlantic and southeast. For day 3, same thing, 2 general thunderstorm risk areas, except there's one for the northwest, one here for the Midwest. We do have that extended day outlook for day 5, which will be for Sunday on March 23rd. This will extend into the morning of Monday, the 24th. But we do have a 15% chance area over Texas, Louisiana, southern Arkansas, and into areas of western Mississippi. This translates roughly to a slight risk of severe weather at least, so level 2 out of 5. This has been around since I think day 7, so this has been around for 2 or 3 days now. Definitely something to watch. I don't see this being a major severe weather outbreak, but it could be a pretty large slight risk day, or maybe even an enhanced risk day. Could be relatively active there for Sunday on the 23rd. We're going to be watching closely. With all that being said, we upload every single day. Be sure to subscribe. You can even hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload so you never miss one. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it. Leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.